Good afternoon. Welcome to our Mondays with EFTI.Talk. The Eric Friedheim Tourism Institute and the Department of Tourism, Hospitality, and Event Management in the College of Health and Human Performance at the University of Florida is presenting to you EFTI.Talk, focused on crisis leadership during the pandemic. Our moderator and speakers are presenting their diversity of talents from the perspectives of marketing, operations, sales directors, and the chief of executive officer. It is my honor to introduce our moderator. Howard Tietjen has 20 plus years of experience in travel and tourism. In his previous role as a senior vice president and partner, he helped build a company that is recognized as one of the premier digital marketing companies. Howard has received several industry certifications, including Certified Tourism Executive and the Google Trusted Digital Media Advisor. Today, as the Director of Sales at Epsilon, Howard's efforts are focused on working with industry leaders to bring new ideas and new technology. He currently serves as the chairman of the Industry Advisory Board of the Eric Friedheim Tourism Institute at the University of Florida. Howard, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Rachel, and welcome everyone. So glad to be with you today. It's really exciting today to have the panelists that we have available to us today to discuss how to strive, survive, and thrive in a pandemic. It's been an interesting year, as we all know, and so it's going to be a great conversation today as we move forward. Joining me today, I have Richard Goldman, who's the president and CEO of St. Augustine, Ponte, Vedra, and the Beaches, a smaller destination here in Florida, but obviously one that is very, very much dependent upon tourism and our local economy here. I also have Scott Rose, who is the Senior VP and Chief Operating Officer at ZooTampa. Scott's going to bring a different perspective to our conversation today as we talk about how he's been working through all of this at an attraction and the differences that provides us to look at today, the differences between a DMO and an attraction. And then finally, we have Patrick Harrison representing, he's the Chief Marketing Officer of Visit Tampa Bay. Patrick will be representing a larger destination for us, but again, one that is very dependent upon and where tourism is a very, very important part of their economy. So let's jump into it, gentlemen, and start our conversation here. We're going to keep it conversational today, folks. Please feel free to use the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen to enter in any questions. Towards the end of this webinar, we will be answering those questions for you. So let's start here. So, wow, it's been 9 months or so now we've been dealing with this. Let's go back to the beginning though. As the pandemic started, what did you guys, in a minute or two, why don't you each tell us what you did as we started this, say, in the first 60 days? Why don't we start with Patrick?
Thank you, Howard. Well, I mean, it was an interesting time. It's still an interesting time, but if you remember the first few weeks of this, it was really a case of having to transition, and I'm going to try and avoid using the word pivot apart from that example right there. It was really trying to transition from what we were, which was a destination marketing organization, into a community leadership and a community forum and community outreach organization. Obviously we turned off all the paid advertising immediately. We didn't want to be bringing in people in the situation we were in, but as a partner-based organization with 800 members, our job really became communicating with them about what was going on, making sure we had content on the website about the ever-changing safety situations and guidelines we were in, and really just trying to help become an information source. It was really one of those times where we went from paid to earned and social media very quickly, because social media turned to be so vital in getting the messaging out quickly and efficiently. So that's kind of where we began.
How about you, Richard, in St. Augustine?
Yeah, it's true. We all really became resources for our stakeholders. Most of our stakeholders are smaller businesses. and so that didn't have the resources that many larger businesses or those associated with big flags could reach out to. So we spent a good deal of time after stopping the advertising, and of course our budget went away instantly, so we had to get on that right away. But we began the outreach to national organizations, Attractions Association, the National Accommodations Lodging Association, Restaurant Association, to determine what their status was on the proper areas to operate to CDC guidelines. We also became a conduit to the CDC for our stakeholders. So it was gathering those informations, providing a conduit by which we could communicate. We have become a trusted source for those kinds of information as we've dealt with hurricanes and other crises over the last several years. So it was important for us to maintain those connections with stakeholders and to provide those essential conduits for information. We built an entire website around toolkit for accessing those kinds of information, the best way to operate in the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and of course, the primary lockdown. And like Patrick and Scott, I answered questions daily, constantly, into the evening as to what the proper interpretation was, how to get answers for interpreting the rules and regulations coming out of Tallahassee, our county seat, and our various cities. So becoming a resource to our stakeholders, that was the essential work we did in the initial months.
So Scott, we're really happy to have you on board with us here today and bringing a different perspective from an attraction. So in the first 60 days or so, how did you guys react?
Thank you, Howard. In the attractions industry, including zoos and aquariums and theme parks and museums and such, obviously we all had to deal with the inevitable closure. When the pandemic first started, we tried to modify our operations so we could stay open as long as we could. But in mid-March, we realized that we had no choice but to shut down. And in doing so, we needed to look at ways that we could curtail our expenses to the best of our ability. And we ended up furloughing 80% of the staff here at ZooTampa. About 300 people were furloughed. Fortunately, we were able to keep all of their medical benefits and all whole, and they were able to get onto the enhanced unemployment. However, we have 1,100 animals in our care here at ZooTampa, so we needed to retain the animal care staff to take care of those animals. They still needed to eat and have wellness and be taken care of. So we had a skeleton crew that took care of the animals, kept the park safe, and continue on with the operations, despite the fact that we weren't receiving any visitors. So that was step one. Step two is we needed to curtail all of our marketing expenses and reached out to all of our marketing vendors and stopped all of our advertising out there and to save as much money as possible, and looking at other ways to cut costs. It's very expensive to run a zoo. We're 93% self-funded, which means we're dependent on people walking through our gates, and we have nobody walking through our gates. We don't have any revenue coming in. Fortunately, we were the recipient of the Paycheck Protection Plan, which helped quite a bit. We also had a couple of large donors step in and help us out, and a lot of smaller donors as well. We put together an emergency operating fund, and we had tremendous outpouring of support from people, like all of you, and we're very grateful for all of that. That helped to offset the loss of revenue. But our biggest concern was to make sure that our animals were taken care of, our people were taken care of the best of our abilities. Fortunately, we didn't lay anybody off. Furlough is not a layoff, and we brought all of those people back. And I'll talk a little later on how we reopened and such. But those were
I never really thought about the the animals in a situation like that. You know, what a unique challenge that you must have had. So now, I mean, and none of us, I think, expected this to, at least I didn't, you know, I thought a couple months we'll be back to normal and be moving along in the summertime, but here we are 8-9 months into this. So what's changed? What are you doing now as opposed to when this first started? Patrick, you want to start us off there?
Sure. I mean, it's been a very interesting time, you know, really. And I think I've said this in other calls with people, you know, doing your job when everything's going well is easy. These challenges and when these things come up is actually, it's as a marketer, as a destination marketer, is actually a great opportunity. You know, it really does give you, you know, the opportunity to try and do new things, do some different outreach. And one of the first things we've done was we put together a regional coalition of about 10 different destination marketing organizations in Florida. So we could learn some best practices, so we could, you know, kind of help each other through things. But really, once that everything got underway and we got to around June, we really began a recovery campaign. You know, we really started going back out there looking at drive markets because, you know, we've got to safely bring people back into town. Without that economic activity, you know, a lot more people in Tampa would be hurt. So we really had to look at more safe opportunities, different types of media to reach out to. We actually, right now, are spending more on paid media than we've probably ever done, thanks to some Federal CARES Act funding and some reserves from the TDC. We've actually been able to get out there and do a lot more conversion-based media, really trying to target people to come immediately. And now, you know, we're planning to really up that even further going into the new year, as safely as we can, because what it comes down to really is we've had to learn to be really, really flexible. And I think people have used that word before or become a buzzword. But, you know, we used to say short-term planning was 6 months and in. Now short-term planning is what are we going to do before Friday? And it's really, we have to look at being able to turn things on, turn things off, turn things up, turn things down, depending on where what's going on in the economy, what's going on in the market, and what's going on with COVID. But I tell you, it does make you pay a lot more attention to just about everything. And that's actually, I think, being good for the whole team here.
That's interesting. How about you, Richard? What's changed? What are you doing now?
Well, we're still providing essential information to our residents and to our stakeholders. But our focus now is entirely on stimulating sustainable visitation. We were hampered by the fact that our budget was cut off immediately in March. We had some money in the bank, but that was it. That would have allowed us very, very little by way of any outreach. Social media, we have some very strong channels, great publicity team that is in-house. So we would have been able to maintain that. But we initiated an advocacy program and facilitated it with our stakeholders to go out and get some reserve funding from the county. Our TDC does not manage or maintain reserves. So we had to go to the general fund. We were successful, and that allowed us to then pivot on, sorry, there's that word, Patrick, on what our campaign had just been launched in November, to adjust that campaign to fit what travelers were interested in doing at the time. That's real important. In our destination, we have plenty of outdoor dining and experiential opportunities. We're a small destination, predominantly fed by guide traffic, lots of beach, 42 miles. So that was real important for us to get that messaging out, to adjust our campaign so that it fit with what the travelers, potential travelers, were interested in. And when I say monitoring that information, we all have the advantage of working with destination analysts, a company that has been providing week-to-week metrics on large samples of potential travelers across America, week to week. And that's been a wonderful resource for us It allowed us to make adjustments so that in July, when we had the money arranged, when we had built a campaign or an adjustment to our campaign, we were able to get out there with messaging. And we wound up with September producing actually better than the previous year. And for some of our accommodations, a record October. Maintaining that's a challenge in this current environment, but our focus really got very quickly to getting back to sustainable tourism. And we're fortunate that we're able to do that because not all of our brethren in the destination marketing organizations have been able to do that.
Indeed. Guy, you told us right before you joined us, right after you joined us here, that you're outside feeding an orangutan. So apparently the animals are still being fed. So that's great news. But you know, since those opening moments where you were furloughing folks, how are things have changed? Have you reopened? Tell us more about what's going on.
Sure. Yeah. Well, feeding animals around here is everybody's responsibility. Kind of fun. So as I said before, mid-March, we faced the inevitable closure. We were closed for 2.5 months. We spent the first half of that closure shutting everything down that we could to provide as much cost savings as we can with, again, number one, keeping the animals safe and healthy. We spent the second half of our closure preparing to reopen. And that was an interesting process because we had to put together what we call a modified operations plan, that we would operate this facility in the safest way possible with the safety protocols that all of us know we needed to put into place. We implemented that modified operations plan. First of all, we had to have it approved by the county, by the city, and by the state. So they had to sign off on this modified operations plan to allow us to open. We opened up on May 28th. Those safety protocols included limiting capacity because we can't do the attendance that we could in the past. Thermal imaging cameras taking people's temperature as they walked in through the front entrance to make sure that they didn't have a fever. Social distancing markers all around the park to make sure people stayed 6 feet apart. Some of our experiences we couldn't operate because of the safety of our guests. They wouldn't allow for it in these unusual times. So all of those safety protocols that you've seen at different theme parks and all masks being worn, et cetera, we have continued, and to this day, several months later, have those safety protocols in place, and we enforce them each and every day. Once we reopened, we needed to rebuild our business. Well, first of all, while we were closed, we used social media to a great extent to keep the zoo top of mind with all of our friends and followers here. And so we didn't want people to forget about us. And so we did an awful lot of social media and some pretty cool stuff, you know, with when you have the content like animals. But when we reopened, we had to rebuild our business, and it came in slowly and built through the course of the summer. And we have obviously modified our marketing efforts to focus on the markets that will drive the most business. Fortunately, we have a strong local following, membership base. We do have a fair amount of tourist business normally, but the tourists aren't for the most part in town. So we focus more on locals and nearby markets and reaching staycationers, if you will, people who want to get out and drive for an hour or two and spend some time at the zoo here. We're very fortunate in that we are predominantly an outdoor facility here at the zoo, and people want to be outdoors. They want to be in the fresh air and open spaces, and we can provide that. We're not too small, but we're not too big, and so we have a very good model here, if you will, or product here for these times. So that's worked to our advantage. Our business has come back in a pretty good way. September, October, November have been strong. I'm pleased to say that we are back at previous attendance levels, at least to the degree that we can be with the limited attendance. So the demand is there. Going forward, we don't know what we're going to have to do. You know, things are shutting down again. If we were operating in California, we would not have opened today and would probably be shuttered for several months. We don't know what's going to happen in Florida, but we are cautiously optimistic about our future going forward. And you know, but it's an uphill every day.
Indeed, it is. It must be a struggle sometimes. Are you, when you say you're back at previous levels, are you profitable at this point in time, or I mean?
Yes, we are.
Good.
You know, we made it through from a financial perspective in good shape. Like I said before, with the PPP, with a couple of large donations and cutting expenses, we were able to come through it in good shape. And right now, we are running favorable from a financial perspective.
Outstanding.
Again, aren't the busiest months of the year for us, so that's why we can do it and still maintain that capacity limitations. As we get into the spring, which is our peak season next year, we're probably going to be turning people away, which is going to hurt our financial during the peak time of the year for us.
Richard, you used the word advocacy a moment ago, so let's kind of turn our attention in that direction. You know, I'm a resident of the St. Augustine area, so I know a lot of the political situations that you've faced in the past. But you know, how have you dealt with the political response to this crisis?
Well, Howard, as you know, our destination, like some others, have experienced high congestion, some traffic challenges, the things that residents don't like about the destination. We had instituted a program of outreach to residents to help share with them the importance of the lifestyle, how they benefit from a financial and infrastructure basis. But nothing provided the kind of example of the importance of tourism like this pandemic and the shutdown. So we had some of the more vocal opponents to tourism join the chorus for let's get visitors back here, let's get people back to work, let's get the government coffers back to churning and protecting the lifestyle and the infrastructure. So that's something that I would say out of this, we should all pay attention to. We shouldn't just be approaching our electeds or our residents when crisis times occur. They need to know the value of what we do, and not just financial, but in terms of the lifestyle they enjoy. We need to be talking to them all the time and helping make them aware of what can be done. That level of advocacy is something we launched 5 years ago. It's gotten better. We did have to change our approach at pandemic a bit. The good news was we didn't have to convince them we were important anymore. We just had to convince them of priorities and how it would be that they could assist in inviting others. And part of that is something that we all need to continue doing, and that is making sure that our visitors feel safe, that our employees feel safe, and that our residents feel safe in an environment where we're inviting people into our destination. And that is a tightrope. And I think many of us experienced something very different in the initial months of being open than we are right now.
Yeah, we felt that impact in our family. My son and his wife both work in the restaurant industry in St. Augustine, and you know, both immediately were let go and were without paychecks for a while. So, you know, even a guy like me who's in the tourism industry who grumbles every now and then about how crowded it is in downtown St. Augustine suddenly realized, you know, this is very real. This affects people in a very, very real way. Patrick, how about in Tampa? I mean, how have you dealt with the political situation locally there?
Well, you know, a couple of things. You know, we like Richard said, you know, waiting until there's a bad time and then starting to reach out to people, you know, is a recipe for disaster. You know, very front foot with that advocacy, or have been for a very long time. You know, we remind people that our job is not to bring tourists here, it's for the betterment of the community and bringing in, you know, economic stability through tourism as one way of doing it. So we've always had, not always, but for quite a few years now, we've really made efforts with our local community to explain all the different things we do. Obviously, I think it's easier at the local level than maybe it is at the state level, but just because different people have different agendas at different levels. But I think our local community, both the politicians, the county commissioners, the TDC, our major partners, because, you know, we have some pretty big attractions and hotels and so on here. They were on our side and actually going to bat for us, and I think that helped. By the way, I will say we did a resident survey last year, and the residents loved us, but the biggest complaint was traffic. I think if people were alone on a deserted island, they would complain about the traffic. That's like the one thing that always comes out. But no, so it's been a lot of local outreach and industry outreach. As mentioned earlier, we worked with a lot of different DMOs to do the same thing. So if there's a problem in Fort Myers or Sarasota or wherever it would be, we can give each other advice. We can talk about how we overcome some of these things. And it's also helped, you know, with from a funding situation, in that, you know, if you've built up that trust and you've shown that you deliver results, it then comes back to, you know, the TDC or whoever it is being more willing to open up the reserves or to support the causes that you're doing. And I think that's something we have to all continue to keep going with, because, you know, elections go one way or the other. The county commission can be Democrat one time, Republican the next, but they all care about the local community and the economic prosperity. So long as you have an area where you can agree, I think you can move forwards.
Do either of you guys at the DMO level, do you think this is sustainable, or what's your guess? I mean, as we move beyond this and we get back to whatever normal looks like in 6 months or a year, do you think people will just go back to their old ways, or do you think that the lessons that we've learned here are sustainable?
You know, I would like to hope that it will, there'll be people have long-term memories, but this is also the same population that after a weather event, we hope they have a short-term memory and start traveling again quickly. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to depend, because I know right now everybody thinks we have the magic bullet with the vaccine and everyone's going to be back to normal tomorrow, but it's going to be a while, and I think we're going to have to continue to work together. But I'm hoping that we can continue to use these as foundational building blocks. The relationships will only strengthen over time. But, you know, again, people do have sometimes short-term memories, and suddenly, you know, they want to have the hotels 100% full all the time, and sometimes it could be a little unreasonable.
So Scott, as an attraction, your challenges are a bit different. How has the zoo responded to quote unquote political pressure?
Well, there hasn't been a lot of political pressure as it's confronted this industry, other than, as I mentioned before, we're being watched very closely on our operations to ensure that we're delivering a safe experience by political organizations. Consumers want to get out and they want to do things. As I said before, you know, our business is rebounding, so there's not a big issue there. But I'll tie to what Patrick was talking about, which was industry reaching out within the industry for support from one another. We're part of the Florida Attractions Association, which is a statewide organization made up of about 125 attractions, small attractions to the largest attractions in the state. And this association has worked very closely together throughout this whole ordeal, from closing to reopening to sustaining our business, to help each other with, you know, benchmarks and how we're getting through, sharing the modified operations and best practices and what's working, what's not working. You might say that we're all competitors. Well, to a degree we are, but we're really not. We're one industry that works together to be stronger. And this Florida Attractions Association is a great asset that we have in our industry, that all of us can be working together. And in some cases, that's looking at different advocacy issues that confront our industry on a local or more on a state level as well.
So Patrick and Richard, Scott's talked a lot about safety protocols, capacity. How does that play into destination marketing?
Well, as I kind of alluded to earlier, one of the things that the traveler sentiment is making clear is that the long-term traveler, the one who's going to spend a lot of money, who's thinking about making choices about where to go, they want to know that it's a safe destination, that you take their concerns seriously, that businesses are operating in a safe manner. And so communicating that and convincing, because we really don't have the authority to mandate. So we have to share information and attempt to convince our stakeholders and our businesses to operate as safely as possible. Because you know, we're in a position that is very, very fragile. Should there be a major outbreak at an individual destination that gets some national publicity to that extent, it's going to hurt them, and it's going to hurt them quickly. So I'm spending a great deal of my time now attempting to convince our operators and our stakeholders to operate as carefully and thoughtfully as possible. And listen, you know, times are tough. There's folks trying to make up for a lot of lost revenue. And it's very tempting to cut corners. But if we cut corners, that Q2.5, when the pundits say we're going to be headed towards a better recovery, that's going to be a long time if we're struggling with you know, the feeling that our destination is not safe for one reason.
No, to take it from another angle, so I don't just repeat exactly the good answer that Richard just gave. Talking from a convention perspective, because you know Tampa is also, we have a very large convention center, and that convention and meetings business is a good 10% foundation business for us, and obviously right now that is zero. You know, that every meeting, every convention has canceled, probably through the first quarter of 21. Which is not surprising. It's just the same way business travelers are really not traveling right now unless they have to. But it has given us the opportunity. We're working very closely with the Tampa Convention Center to make sure all of these safety protocols are in place. Think about just the basic stuff. I mean, every convention you go to, it was usually a buffet lunch. We can't just have buffet lines anymore. You know, as you talk about hand sanitation and hand sanitizer, it's about spacing, it's about entrance and egress. There's so many things that go into this, because until we make people feel safe, they're not going to do this. And we're going to make them feel safe by making ourselves feel safe and and us getting out there and doing it. So that has led us to some hybrid events that we can start putting together. Obviously, we're doing this. Everybody's doing a lot more of these than they were. But human nature, I think, at some stage is going to want to get back together. And I can tell you one of the things that it's enabled us to do is to reach out to events that normally would have been too big for us. You know, I mean, our convention center only holds so many people. It's brick and mortar. But some of the bigger events that may have been in Orlando or Vegas before, we can now go after, because we know not only will they have a smaller crowd, but they'll also be partially hybrid. So we're actually in a way being able to pick up new business. I mean, we're about to announce this week that we've picked up a huge major piece of business that for next summer, which, we're not a beach destination. So July and August tend to be our, a couple of our slower months. So there are opportunities that we can actually make from the situation we're in, and still put people in a safe environment to do so.
So one thing that's really fascinated me has been the media in all of this. and it seems to be all over the board. The local media here in the Northeast Florida seems to have been, for the most part, pretty positive towards our industry. But I'm interested to hear what you guys hear. I'm gonna start with you, Richard. We just started Nights of Lights up here, and we're attracting larger crowds here. How is the media responding to you and to this situation?
The media response has been very positive, but I want to leave folks with the thought that that's not something that you do. You snap your fingers given a crisis. You've got to work on media relations for a long time. We have, in some cases, broken some of the dogma about media relations by being responsive to them, by finding answers to their questions. I'm a journalism major from University of Florida many, many years ago, but they just need content and they need answers to their questions. And to the extent that you can help them get it, you can become a resource. If you can become a resource for the industry, it helps you shape, and I don't mean that in a nefarious sense, it just allows you to help provide the kinds of information that gets them where they need to be, and at the same time, hopefully, presents your perspective. So an example would be Nights of Lights has been essential to us coming out of hurricane seasons where we were affected, coming out of this, and I say coming out, we're neck deep in it. But finding a way for them to come to you and hear your perspective, to hear the efforts that we're putting forth in trying to make this a sustainable experience and a safe experience. That helps. And it means that even when, if there is something negative to say, we'll have an opportunity to respond to it. And so, one of the things that I hope folks take away from this is the importance of leadership in publicity, leadership in media relations, by developing the kinds of relationships, which, by the way, have to be continued. It's not something that you can do with a phone call every other month. I know Patrick hears from the media regularly, as do I, and Scott as well. But being a resource for them, a positive resource that they can depend on, will make sure that you have an opportunity with them.
I would jump on that and say, we're a fairly major media market, at least from a Florida perspective. A bunch of TV stations, well, one regular newspaper now, a couple of business publications. I think their response to us has been very positive. I think, in the past, we've been challenged to try and get across to them just how much of an economic impact tourism has and just how important all of the different hospitality businesses really and truly are, whether it be a mom and pop restaurant or to a major attraction, just what the economic intent is. This pandemic has shown just how important our industry is. So I think they've been reaching out a lot more to us than ever before. And Richard's right. You have to start building these relationships year over year over year. And I think you show your reliability, that you're transparent, that you're honest. All of these things that you have to do anyway. But I think now they come to us much more with more in-depth questions, and they know that we can be a resource. I think between myself and especially our CEO, Santiago Corrado, has been into probably about 100 different TV and newspaper interviews since this began. I think, really become vital to a lot of what these news outlets are getting, because we don't have an agenda to this. There's no politics with us. We want to tell the truth. We want to help our local businesses. If it's a safety issue, we want people to know what the steps are, because we want them to be healthy. Because if there is a major as Richard said, if there's a major outbreak, that's going to reflect poorly on our whole industry. So it has given us an opportunity to build it even stronger. And the one or two media that we may have had issues with beforehand kind of gone away. They're suddenly a lot quieter than they were. So it's been the media discussions have been probably the most positive thing that's come out of all of this.
So you've got a little event coming up after the first of the year there in Tampa that you've been doing a lot of planning for, which has had to change radically here. So when the Super Bowl comes to town, are you planning anything special with the media, or you have any significant concerns about this worldwide media coverage that'll occur then?
Well, it's going to be interesting. I mean, because it's not going to be a regular Super Bowl, nor can we ever pretend that it will be. We're going to be talking about 20-25% maybe attendance. We don't know that. We've had a huge number of media have registered. 395 media outlets have already registered. Which doesn't mean 395 people, because one of those outlets is ESPN. So obviously they're going to send more than one person. Same with CBS. A lot of the non-sanctioned events that go around it have been cancelled or put on hold. Fortunately, we have a 3-mile long outdoor river walk with parks, so we can move the Super Bowl experience outside. And we can, just as the attractions are doing, you give people reservations. They have times and when they can come in and go, and we can keep the numbers limited. But I think it is going to be hopefully more of a coming out party. You think the rest of the world, especially internationally, has not been able to see Florida for 9 months. And we're going to get coverage all over domestic and global news and sports shows and everything for a week. So knocking on a lot of wood that, that things don't get worse. And we know they're going to get worse between now and then, just because of Thanksgiving and Christmas and the spreading that's going to happen. But I think we have an opportunity to really come out with something positive and show, sunshine, blue skies, people outdoors together, and really the biggest event in American sports. Even in a year like this, it's still going to be, I think, a successful event, and it's one that we're looking forward to. But I got to tell you, normally everything's in place by now, and right now, it keeps changing. So we'll see.
Right. Well, before we open this up for Q&A, one last question for you guys. This is more looking forward. So as we think about moving forward and kind of going back to the drawing board, what's next? I mean, one of the conversations that Patrick, you and I have had a little bit about has been about visitor yield and about thinking about, I think, Richard, this applies to you as well. And Scott, as you think about limited capacity and so forth, have you guys thought much about, and how are you planning to think about how you bring the right people to your destination or to your attraction? People are going to spend more money versus just masses of people.
Well, I think if I can just jump in quickly on that one. The conversation had already started turning to yield beforehand, because we were running pretty full. And it was a case of there's only so many people you could bring in at one time. There's a certain limit of beds, there's a certain limit of things. Actually, while I was saying that, we are, about another 1,000 hotel rooms about to come on very quickly in Hillsborough County. But really, it is about yield. This is going to come back slowly, I think, over 2021. So we need to bring the people that, not only can come safely and feel safe, but the people that can help our economy the most. I need people going and eating $200 dinners at Burns and not getting a Happy Meal at McDonald's. This is where we need to start looking, and we've made a concerted effort over the last few years. The hotels and the restaurants and everything we have brought online every year get better. The offerings we have every year get better. We're opening a JW Marriott within weeks. It'll be a big step here in this market. We're going to open our first 5-star hotel coming up in the next few months. You have to have the right people to fill those. This can't be the average person that we were looking at before. We need to really look into markets of where people make more money. And it's not just, and as I've learned, it's not just household income, it's net worth, because, the two things can be different.
Absolutely. Scott, how about at the zoo? I mean, I think getting the right person at the zoo to ultimately maybe become a partner with you or a donor, what are your thoughts about trying to attract that person to the zoo?
Well, it's a very good question about yield, because you're right. As we are in a position that we have to limit capacity, we have to have the right people that will spend money in the park. And As I said before, we have a strong local following, but we've lost the tourist base of our attendance mix. And the tourist base are those that have a tendency to spend more per capita in the park than locals, because they're here, they'll stay longer, and they'll spend more money. So we have to replace those with attendees that will have a longer length of stay. And that's why I said we're really refocusing a lot of our marketing efforts on going after the staycation business, people that are coming and they're going to drive a couple of hours. And if they're going to invest that kind of time, they're going to come and they're going to stay in the park longer. And the longer they stay in the park, the more they spend on food and merchandise. We're also implementing programs that entice them to spend more once they get to the park here. In-park spending is probably about 40% of our overall revenue stream. So it's extremely important for us to, number one, have the appropriate attendance mix, and then number two, the longer length of stay, and encourage people to spend more in the park, more time in the park and more money in the park. That's what it translates to.
Exactly.
The yield conversation it feels very simple frequently. More is better. Getting fewer people who yield higher revenues in market is good. It's like apple pie. What you have to be ready for, in my opinion, and what we've discovered, is their expectations. So you have to find ways to help the market recognize the demands on them. And that means a lot of communication. But at the same time, we've got in our destination more luxury and deluxe product coming online in the next 3 years than we had in the previous 15. So things are really hopping in that direction. But we also have a number of budget and moderate priced properties. We all have vacation rentals, which are a more moderately priced product. We got to spread a lot of that love in a lot of different directions. So as we respond to the market, which says as you become more full, the price points go up, as the demand increases, we do need to remember that there are folks at the moderate and budget level whose products need to be filled as well. And so we work with our communication to communicate a better, more interesting, slightly more sophisticated product at the same time as we're saying we're accessible to other folks. And the beauty of the digital world and the social world now, media, is that you can use different voices to speak to those audiences. And that's something, again, it's sacrilege to the marketing people in the room. But the truth is that's something we can do now. And we're obliged to take care of everyone.
All right, we got about 10 minutes left here, guys, and we have a couple of questions. So I'm gonna turn it to some Q&A here from the audience. Barbara from Paradise Advertising asked a great question here. So how are you using consumer data differently in this COVID era to best refine your customer targeting and your media efforts?
Well, I can just remark that, Barbara, it's good to hear that you're on the call. One of the things that we do differently is that we are using vehicles and resources that are different, that are monitoring week to week traveler sentiments. We've been, everybody who knows me knows we're very focused on metrics, but this is a new layer of metrics that we've not experienced before, and it allows us to be even more facile. Patrick remarked that short-term planning is within the week. Well, we get reports on Monday from research that was done over the weekend, and that helps us pivot. Sorry, there it goes again. But it allows us to adjust based on the information we receive. And of course, our budgets being diminished mean that we have to focus those dollars where we can get the biggest bang for the buck. So that's different than when you're you've got another $2 million more than than you have this year.
To jump onto data, we all, I think, use data a lot more than we ever did. When I got into marketing a long time ago, we used to joke about, 50% of your advertising wasted, you just don't know which 50%. Well, now we know where every penny is going and what the ROI is on every piece. The challenge, I think, sometimes that we have is that we have more data than we can possibly use, and some of it is contradictory. That's one of the steps we've really been taking the last a few months and moving forwards, is into finding a way to streamline this into something that's more manageable so that we can react in the correct way. Because if consumer travel sentiment, what people say they're going to do and what people do are not necessarily the same thing. What people say they did and what they really did are not the same thing. What people spend and whatever, we need to really follow this more closely. And there's so many ways we can do that now, between, pinging cell phones to following people's credit card payments, which Howard's nodding on because that's one of his company's services. This is the data that we want to use because it provides opportunities, whether we're looking for high yield, whether we need to run a campaign specifically aimed at seniors, whether we need to aim something specifically aimed at families. And that's stuff that 10 years ago, we would have not been able to do to anywhere near the sophistication that we have now. And I think that's just going to keep going. I mean, it's getting to the stage where we're going to know more about people than they know about themselves.
I think we had a very interesting conversation the other day, Patrick, when we were just talking about the data that we were looking at. When we started looking at, you mentioned it earlier, not just household income, but net worth and age, and looking at that correlation and understanding that a more senior market is available to you, and thinking about how we would address that with advertising, both creatively and then about how we would target that audience.
Well, yeah, I mean, we always get told that the household income of travelers in the state of Florida is so low, but it doesn't take into effect just how many of them are on fixed incomes and are retired and, own a $3 million home or whatever it may be. So sometimes you have to look beyond just the average base demographics, which used to get thrown out of certain age groups, and just aim at people in the 30s who are female, blah blah. It doesn't work like that anymore. Now we have to run specific targeted campaigns that reach each of our audiences. And actually, going back to this pandemic has actually been one of the ways that that's forced each and every one of us to sit down and do that. You can't throw things against the wall and hope anymore. We need to make sure every dollar we spend it brings back more than just that dollar.
So if I could jump in.
Yeah, please do, Scott.
So for ZooTampa, we happen to have a very good agency by the name of Paradise that is headed up by a person by the name of Barbara, who just asked that question. Thank you very much, Barbara. We do work in tandem with our agency to help data mine and refine all of our advertising marketing efforts to the best of our ability. Make quick adjustments to them as to what's working, what's not working, and adjust in real time as quickly as possible. The market changes every single day. We also do a tremendous amount of research, both with our park visitors to learn where they're coming from now. Our mix has changed quite a bit, so we have to know who's coming and why. We also do a lot of intent to visit research going forward, and did so when we were closed, so we'd have a better understanding of the future. You can't always look in the rearview mirror. You have to look out through the windshield. So, we use data on a number of fronts in that respect.
All right, one last question here, and then we'll wrap it up here. So there's a couple of different versions of this question out there, but it's really around fatigue and your staffs, yourselves. How do you, as leaders of the different organizations that you work for, how are you dealing with that? These are tough days. Got a lot of people doing a lot of work, wearing a lot of different hats. So how are you managing your staffs, and how are you helping them overcome the pressures and the fatigue that is weighing on them?
Well, one of the things that we're doing, I mean, my team, every one of us took a substantial 20% pay cut, for the duration. So we, already people were sacrificing. They're working from home, which for my directors, managers, that's actually more difficult to manage than typically having folks in the office. So the challenges that they face need to be recognized. And as a leader, I take the responsibility to recognize their sacrifices, recognize their accomplishments, remind them that it's not just a job, it's really a mission. We share economic impact, we share unemployment figures. I tell stories that I hear in the marketplace. They share stories at staff meetings to help energize them on the one hand towards their responsibilities to help people stay employed, and at the other side of that to make them feel good about what they've accomplished when a property reports that they're recovered, that they've hired back their last furloughed employee. I think that goes a long way to keep them energized. Now I have a much smaller staff, than either of my colleagues on here, so it's easier for me to reach out and touch them individually. But I think that's an important part of the process.
Going back to the points we made earlier about you can't come up with a crisis plan and start advocating once the crisis has become. You can't reach out to the media and develop those relationships once the crisis has become. It's the same thing with the team. We had to lay off a lot of our staff very early on, and then build with a much smaller team. And with some salary cuts, which especially affects those who are early in their careers, who are maybe not making as much as some of the others. But it did, I think, bring everyone closer together. I think we became, again, going back, when things are going well, everybody's complaining and doing their own thing. But when you have to all get together, I think people really did. And I think that's still going on. I don't think we've really had any issues with fatigue. Yeah, I mean, obviously every person is different and needs to be worked with in different ways, and they do need to be appreciated. And sometimes you do just need to give them a virtual pat on the back, because obviously we can't touch anybody anymore. But it's been very interesting from a psychological point of view. I think if anything, people feel more energized, like they're really making a difference than they may well have thought they were before, when they were just a cog in a machine.
Excellent. Well, we're about out of time here, so I'm going to turn it back over here to Rachel to close us up. But before we do, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today. We truly appreciate it. This has been a very insightful conversation. Your expertise is very important to the entire industry across the state. So thanks again for your time. Rachel, back to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your time and insights, Patrick, Howard, Richard, and Scott. Friends, colleagues, and students, I appreciate you and your presence. I hope you enjoyed our webinar as much as I have enjoyed having you as our audience. Look forward to seeing you all again on February 8th at 1 p.m. in 2021. Have a healthy and happy new year. Take care. Go Gators.
Go Gators.
Gators.